The wind howling through the concrete canyons of Manhattan didn't just bite, it gnawed. For Mary Vance, the biting cold of a late November evening was more than a seasonal change. It was a countdown. Standing inside the cavernous neon-lit maze of the Port Authority bus terminal, she clutched the hand of her 6-year-old son, Leo. Her fingers were numb, her coat thin and frayed at the seams, a relic of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. 3 months ago, Mary had a home in Ohio and a job at a local library. Today she was a ghost in the machinery of New York City, carrying everything they owned in 2 nylon duffel bags that felt heavier with every passing minute. The terminal was a symphony of desperation and transit. High-pitched announcements echoed off the grime-streaked walls, drowned out by the hiss of hydraulic brakes and the rhythmic shuffling of thousands of feet. Leo looked up at her, his eyes wide and clouded with a fatigue no child should know. "Mom, I'm hungry," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of a departing greyhound. Mary felt a sharp pang in her chest, a physical ache that surpassed the cold. She reached into her pocket and felt the crisp edges of a $5 bill. It was the last of her money. It was meant for a gallon of milk and perhaps a loaf of bread at the bodega, near the shelter they were hoping to reach by midnight. As they moved toward the exit, Mary noticed a man sitting on a cracked plastic bench near the Gate 402 corridor. He looked out of place, yet perfectly invisible. He wore a heavy wool overcoat that had seen better days, stained with what looked like coffee or grease. His hair was a chaotic nest of salt and pepper strands, and his head was buried in his hands. He wasn't begging, he wasn't shouting. He was simply radiating a quiet, profound vibration of defeat. Beside him lay a cardboard sign that had been stepped on so many times the ink was faded, but Mary could make out the words, "Lost my ticket. Need to get home for the surgery." People streamed past him like water around a stone. Businessmen in sharp suits checked their Rolexes. Students with headphones ignored the world. Tourists gripped their bags tighter as they neared him. Mary stopped. Logic told her to keep walking. Logic reminded her of Leo's empty stomach and the looming uncertainty of the night. But Mary saw something in the man's slumped shoulders that she recognized in her own reflection every morning, the weight of a world that had stopped caring. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. The man looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, etched with deep lines of exhaustion. He didn't look like a predator. He looked like a man who had run out of options. "Are you okay?" The man let out a dry, hacking cough. I'm just trying to get to New Jersey. My daughter, she's at the hospital. I lost my wallet somewhere between 42nd Street and here. No phone, no nothing. I just need $5 for the bus. Just 5. Mary looked down at Leo, then back at the man. She felt the $5 bill in her pocket. It was the thin line between a meal and nothing. But she also knew what it felt like to be invisible. She knew that in a city of millions, the smallest act of recognition could be a lifeline. With a hand that trembled slightly, she pulled the bill from her pocket and pressed it into the man's rough, calloused palm. "Go to your daughter," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "Take it, please." The man looked at the bill, then at Mary's tattered coat, and finally at Leo's weary face. He seemed stunned, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Mary didn't wait for a thank you. She adjusted her bags, took Leo's hand, and walked back out into the freezing New York night, her pockets empty, but her heart momentarily lightened by a strange, defiant spark of humanity. The walk to the shelter on 116th Street felt like an odyssey through an urban wasteland. The $5 Mary had given away was a ghost following her, whispering about the sandwiches it could have bought. Leo walked in silence, his small legs struggling to keep pace, his hand gripping hers so tightly it hurt. The city around them was a blur of Christmas lights and luxury window displays, a cruel contrast to the reality of the pavement. "Mom, why did you give that man our money?" Leo asked as they crossed into Harlem. The cold was deepening, turning the slush on the sidewalks into treacherous sheets of black ice. Mary pulled him closer, tucking his head under the flap of her coat. "Because, Leo, sometimes we have to be the light for someone else, even when our own lamp is dim. He needed to see his daughter. We still have each other." She prayed her voice sounded more certain than she felt. Inside, she was screaming. She was a mother who had just given away her last resource. The system was a labyrinth of red tape and overcapacity beds. If the shelter was full, they would be spending the night on a subway train, circling the city in a fluorescent-lit purgatory. When they finally reached the brick building that housed the St. Jude's Emergency Refuge, the line stretched around the block. Men and women stood huddled in blankets, their breath forming white plumes in the air. Mary took her place at the end of the line, shielding Leo from the wind with her own body. The hours crawled by. She watched the clock on a distant bank building. 9 p.m., 10:30 p.m., midnight. By the time they reached the intake desk, Mary was shivering violently. A weary woman behind a plexiglass shield looked at them with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "I'm sorry, honey," the woman said, her voice raspy. "We just gave away the last 2 cots 5 minutes ago. We're at capacity. Fire marshal rules." Mary felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My son, he hasn't eaten since noon. It's freezing outside. Just a chair. We'll sit in the hallway." "I can't. If I get caught, they shut us down," the woman said, though she reached under the desk and pulled out a small granola bar and a juice box. "Take this for the boy. Try the terminal again. Sometimes the transit police let mothers stay in the heated waiting area if the weather is this bad." Mary took the food, her heart sinking into her boots. Back to the terminal. Back to the place where she had given away her last bit of hope. They walked back toward the subway, Leo eating the granola bar with a ferocity that broke Mary's heart. As they descended into the subterranean heat of the one train station, Mary felt a wave of dizziness. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. The train ride was a fever dream of screeching metal and flickering lights. When they arrived back at Port Authority, the atmosphere had shifted. The evening rush was over, replaced by the grim midnight energy of the displaced and the desperate. Mary found a corner near a radiator that was pumping out a meager amount of warmth. She sat on her duffel bag and pulled Leo into her lap. "We'll just rest here for a bit, okay?" she murmured into his hair. "Mom," Leo said, his voice muffled. "Yes, baby." "Do you think that man made it to the hospital?" Mary closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "I hope so, Leo. I really hope so." She fell into a fitful sleep, dreaming of a house with a fireplace and a kitchen filled with the smell of baking bread, unaware that the man she had helped was currently sitting in a glass-walled office 60 stories above the city, staring at a $5 bill as if it were a holy relic. The office was a masterpiece of minimalist glass and polished mahogany overlooking the glittering tapestry of the Manhattan skyline. This was the sanctum of Arthur Sterling, the chief financial officer of Sterling and Thorne Global. On his desk lay a smartphone worth more than Mary's car, a set of keys to a penthouse in Tribeca, and a single crumpled $5 bill. Arthur wasn't wearing the stained wool coat anymore. He was in a bespoke navy suit, but his eyes were still bloodshot. He wasn't a man who had lost his wallet by accident. He was a man who had been conducting a social experiment that had gone horribly wrong, or perhaps horribly right. Arthur had spent the last 3 days living on the streets of New York with nothing but the clothes on his back, filming a documentary about the invisibility of the poor for a charitable foundation he chaired. He had wanted to experience the real New York, but he had underestimated the sheer soul-crushing cold and the psychological weight of being ignored. He had actually lost his handler, the security detail following him from a distance, in the chaos of the subway an hour before he met Mary. He had truly found himself stranded, cold and genuinely hungry for the first time in his 50 years. He had sat on that bench at Port Authority not as an actor, but as a man reaching his breaking point. "Sir?" His assistant, Sarah, knocked softly on the door. "The board is ready for the midnight briefing on the merger." Arthur didn't look up. He was tracing the serial number on the bill. "Sarah, do you know what this is?" She stepped closer, glancing at the money. "It's $5, sir." "No," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is a miracle. A woman gave this to me tonight. She had a son with her. They were cold, they were tired, and she looked like she hadn't seen a decent meal in weeks. I asked for help, me, a stranger who looked like a derelict, and she gave me the last thing she had. I saw her look at her son. She knew the cost, and she gave it anyway." He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I've spent my life moving billions of dollars around digital ledgers. I've signed off on acquisitions that destroyed companies and created empires, but I've never seen wealth like what that woman possessed in her heart. Did you get her name? Sarah asked. Arthur shook his head, a look of profound regret crossing his face. No, I was too stunned. I just watched her walk away into the crowd. I felt like a coward for not stopping her, for not telling her who I was right then. But I realized, if I told her, it would change the purity of what she did. He turned back to his assistant, his eyes sharp with a new purpose. Cancel the merger briefing. Tell the board I'm sick. I want you to call the security team at Port Authority. I want the CCTV footage from Gate 402 between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. I want a facial recognition scan run against every shelter intake and social services database in the tri-state area. Sir, that's a massive undertaking for a woman who saved my soul tonight, Sarah, Arthur interrupted. She's out there somewhere in this cold. She has a little boy. And she's broke because of me. We don't stop until we find her. I don't care what it costs. As Sarah hurried out to execute the orders, Arthur picked up the $5 bill and tucked it into his breast pocket, right over his heart. The Millionaire CFO was gone. In his place was a man who finally understood the true value of currency. The search began with the clinical precision of a military operation. Arthur Sterling didn't just have money. He had connections. By 2 a.m., the head of security at Port Authority was personally reviewing the high-definition feeds. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. There she was, a slight woman in a faded green coat, a child clutching her hand, leaning in to hand a bill to the man on the bench. There, Arthur pointed to the screen, his heart hammering. That's her. Look at her face when she gives it. There's no hesitation, just kindness. We've tracked her exit, Mr. Sterling, the security chief said. She headed toward the north exit, toward the subway. We're pulling the MTA feeds now. But, sir, New York is a big place. If she's staying in an unregistered location or just riding the trains, it could take days. She has a child, Arthur reminded him. She'll look for a shelter. Check the women's beds at St. Jude's, the Covenant House, and the municipal intake at 30th Street. Meanwhile, back at the terminal, Mary was being shaken awake by a transit officer. Can't sleep here, Mom. Move it along. Mary blinked, her head throbbing from the cold and lack of food. Leo was still asleep, his head heavy on her shoulder. Please, she begged, just until the sun comes up. Rules are rules. Out, the officer said, though his eyes showed a flicker of pity. Mary stood up, her joints cracking. She felt a wave of nausea. She picked up the bags and woke Leo. They walked back out into the night. The temperature had dropped further. The air felt like needles against their skin. They found a 24-hour diner, the Silver Spoon, its windows fogged with steam. Mary stood outside, looking at the people inside eating pancakes and drinking steaming mugs of coffee. The smell of bacon was a physical torture. She searched her bags, hoping, praying she had missed a coin, a single quarter tucked in a lining. Nothing. She was truly down to zero. Mom, I'm really cold, Leo said, his lip trembling. Mary made a decision. She walked into the diner. The warmth hit her like a physical blow. The waitress, a woman with a beehive hairdo and a name tag that read Dot, looked up from the counter. She saw the bags, the frayed coat, and the shivering child. Honey, if you're looking for a handout, the manager is real strict, Dot started. I don't want a handout, Mary said, her pride flickering one last time. I have this. She pulled off her wedding ring, a simple, thin gold band. It was the only thing she had left of her late husband, who had died in a car accident a year ago, the event that had started her downward spiral into medical debt and job loss. This is real gold, please. Just a bowl of oatmeal for my son and a cup of hot water. You can keep the ring. Dot looked at the ring, then at the exhausted woman. She didn't take the ring. She pushed it back toward Mary. Sit down in the back booth, sugar, away from the window. I'll bring some mistake pancakes that the cook made. Keep your ring, you're going to need it. For 30 minutes, Mary and Leo sat in the back of the diner. It was a temporary sanctuary. Mary watched Leo eat, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the waitress's mercy. She didn't know that just 3 blocks away, a black SUV was patrolling the streets, and a team of private investigators was showing her picture to every night shift worker in Upper Manhattan. The world was closing in on her, but for the first time in months it wasn't to crush her, it was to catch her. As dawn began to grey the sky over the East River, the temporary sanctuary of the diner came to an end. The morning manager arrived, a man with a sharp tongue and no patience for loiterers. Dot gave Mary a sympathetic look as she slipped a small bag of leftover rolls into her hand. "Good luck, honey," Dot whispered. Mary stepped back out into the world. The adrenaline of the previous night had faded, replaced by a crushing, bone-deep fatigue. Her body felt like it was made of lead. She led Leo toward a small park, hoping to find a bench where they could sit for a moment before she began the grueling process of visiting the social services office again. But as they crossed the street, Mary's luck finally ran out. Her foot caught on an uneven patch of pavement, and she tumbled forward. She managed to twist her body to avoid falling on Leo, but her ankle turned with a sickening pop. She hit the ground hard, the nylon bags spilling their meager contents, mostly clothes and a few of Leo's books, across the dirty sidewalk. "Mom!" Leo cried, rushing to her side. Mary tried to stand, but a white-hot flash of pain shot up her leg. She collapsed back onto the concrete, gasping for air. "I'm okay, Leo. I'm okay," she lied, but the tears were finally falling. She was broken. Physically, financially, and emotionally. She sat on the cold ground, the morning commuters beginning to rush past them, a sea of overcoats and briefcases that didn't even slow down. "Is she hurt?" a voice asked. Mary looked up. A young woman in a jogging outfit had stopped. "Do you need help? Should I call an ambulance?" "No, no ambulance," Mary panicked. An ambulance meant a bill she could never pay. It meant being taken to a hospital where they might call Child Protective Services if they saw her situation. I just need to sit for a minute." The jogger looked uncertain, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a cell phone. "I'll call my friend. He's a doctor nearby." Before she could finish, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade screeched to a halt at the curb. The door flew open and a man jumped out. He wasn't wearing a stained wool coat. He was in a sharp suit, his face etched with a mixture of intense relief and horror. It was him, the man from the bus terminal. Arthur Sterling didn't wait for an explanation. He knelt in the slush beside Mary, ignoring the ruin of his expensive trousers. "I found you," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Thank God I found you." Mary stared at him, confused. Her mind was foggy with pain. "The bus? Did you make it? Did you see your daughter?" Arthur felt a stab of guilt so sharp it nearly took his breath away. "My daughter is fine. She wasn't sick. I wasn't who you thought I was, but what you did, what you gave me, it was the most honest thing I've ever experienced." He looked at her swollen ankle and the way Leo was huddled against her. He looked at the scattered belongings on the street. He felt a rage at a system that allowed a woman like this to fall through the cracks, and a profound humility that she had chosen to help him regardless. "My name is Arthur Sterling," he said, taking her hand. His grip was warm and firm. "And I am going to take care of you. Both of you, I promise." "I don't understand," Mary whispered. "You don't have to," Arthur said. He signaled to his driver, a large man who stepped out and gently lifted Mary as if she weighed nothing. "Let's get you to a doctor. A real one. No more cold, Mary, not ever again." As they were whisked away in the luxury vehicle, Leo looked out the tinted window at the city. For the first time in his life, the skyscrapers didn't look like giants waiting to crush them. They looked like the backdrop of a new world. The transition from the cold pavement to the Sterling penthouse was a sensory overload. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling space of soft carpets, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the scent of sandalwood and expensive citrus. Mary was placed on a velvet sofa that felt like a cloud. Within 30 minutes, a private physician, a friend of Arthur's, arrived. "It's a severe sprain but no break," Dr. Harris said, wrapping Mary's ankle. "She needs rest, high-protein meals, and a lot of hydration. She's severely malnourished and exhausted." Arthur stood by the window, watching Leo. The boy was standing tentatively in front of a massive aquarium, watching a school of tropical fish. A maid had already brought him a tray of hot chocolate and grilled cheese sandwiches. Leo was eating slowly, as if afraid the food might disappear if he moved too fast. "Arthur," Mary called out softly. She was wrapped in a cashmere throw. "Why? Why all of this? You're a millionaire. Why were you at the bus terminal looking like that?" Arthur sat in a chair opposite her. He told her about the documentary, The Social Experiment, and the moment he realized he had lost his way in his own life of luxury. "I wanted to see if the city still had a heart," he said. "I spent 3 days being treated like trash. I was ready to give up on people. And then you appeared. You had nothing and you gave me half of it. You didn't do it for a camera or a tax write-off. You did it because it was right." He leaned forward. "I found out who you are, Mary. I know about your husband. I know about the library in Ohio. I know about the medical bills that wiped out your savings. You're not a homeless woman. You're a hero who got dealt a bad hand." Mary looked around the room. It felt like a dream she would wake up from at any moment. "I can't stay here, Arthur. This isn't my world." "It can be," Arthur replied. "I'm not just going to give you money, Mary. That would be too easy. I'm going to give you a life. My company has a foundation. We're opening a new literacy center in the Bronx. We need a director, someone who understands books, but more importantly, someone who understands people. The salary includes a housing stipend and full benefits." Mary's breath hitched. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a career," Arthur corrected. "And in the meantime, this penthouse has 5 bedrooms. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and my daughter is away at university. This place is a museum of ghosts. I'd like some life in it. Stay here while you get on your feet. Let Leo go to the school down the street. Let him be a kid again." Mary looked at Leo, who was now pointing at a blue tang fish and laughing. She thought of the $5 bill. She had given it away as a desperate act of faith, a message to the universe that she was still human. The universe had answered with a roar. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Arthur said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the crumpled $5 bill, now encased in a small acrylic frame. "You already paid the deposit." The first week at the penthouse was a period of decompression. Mary found it hard to sleep in a bed so soft. She often woke up in the middle of the night, panicked, looking for her bags. Leo, however, adapted with the resilience of childhood. He loved the magic refrigerator that was always full and the fact that he could take a hot bath whenever he wanted. However, the transition wasn't without its shadows. One afternoon, while Arthur was at the office, a man arrived at the penthouse. He was tall, dressed in a sharp but cheap-looking suit, and he didn't look happy. It was Marcus, Mary's brother-in-law. Marcus had tracked her down through a series of frantic phone calls to the shelter system, not out of love, but out of greed. He had heard through the grapevine that Mary had been picked up by a billionaire. "So this is where you've been hiding," Marcus said, pushing his way past the startled housekeeper. He found Mary in the library, surrounded by first editions she had been cataloguing for Arthur as a way to feel useful. "Marcus, how did you find me?" Mary stood up, her heart racing. Marcus was a man of gambling debts and broken promises. He had been the one to pressure her into selling her car and her husband's tools after the funeral, taking most of the money for investments that never materialized. "Doesn't matter," Marcus said, his eyes roaming the luxury of the room. "You hit the jackpot, Mary, the CFO of the year. I saw the news snippet about his homeless experiment. You're the mystery lady, which means you're sitting on a gold mine. I'm working for him, Marcus. He's helping me get my life back. That's all." "Helping you? Please, these guys don't help for free. You're his PR stunt, the saint of Port Authority. Listen, I'm in a hole, 5 grand. If I don't pay by Friday, things get ugly. You ask your boyfriend for the money. Tell him it's for family expenses. He won't even notice it's gone." "No," Mary said, her voice firm. "I won't do that. Arthur has been more than generous. I won't exploit his kindness." Marcus's face darkened. He stepped toward her, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you're better than me now. Because you're living in a castle? You're still a beggar, Mary, and if you don't get me that money, I'll go to the tabloids. I'll tell them how you staged that meeting at the bus terminal. I'll ruin his precious reputation and yours. Get out, a cold, commanding voice echoed through the room. Arthur was standing in the doorway. He had come home early for a meeting. His face was a mask of iron. Mr. Sterling, I was just... Marcus started, his bravado instantly vanishing. I heard everything, Arthur said, walking into the room. He didn't look angry. He looked dangerous. I've dealt with people like you my entire career. You're a bottom feeder. You have 10 seconds to leave this building before my security team ensures you never set foot in Manhattan again. And if you so much as whisper Mary's name to a journalist, I will spend every penny I have to make sure you spend the next decade in a courtroom. Marcus scrambled for the door, nearly tripping over his own feet. As the door slammed shut, Mary sank into a chair, shaking. I'm so sorry, Arthur. I didn't want my mess to follow me here. Arthur knelt beside her. Mary, everyone has a past. The difference is, yours is a story of survival. His is a story of cowardice. You're part of this family now, and we protect our own. The word family hung in the air, warm and solid. For the first time, Mary realized that the $5 hadn't just bought her a job. It had bought her a sanctuary. 3 months later. The Bronx Literacy Center was a vibrant explosion of color in a neighborhood that had long been gray. The walls were covered in murals of open books that turned into birds. The shelves were packed with everything from Dr. Seuss to Shakespeare. Mary Vance stood in the center of the room, wearing a professional blazer and a smile that reached her eyes. She was no longer the ghost of Port Authority. She was the director. She spent her days helping immigrants learn English, helping high school dropouts get their GEDs, and running a story hour that had become the highlight of the neighborhood for local children. Arthur Sterling was there for the official ribbon cutting. He watched Mary from the back of the room. He saw the way she listened to people, really listened. She didn't look down on them. She looked at them with the eyes of someone who had been in the trenches. She's incredible, a board member whispered to Arthur. Where did you find her? She found me, Arthur said, a private smile on his face. After the ceremony, Arthur and Mary walked through the nearby park. The weather was turning cold again, but this time they were prepared. Leo was running ahead of them, playing tag with a group of local kids. He was healthy, his cheeks rosy, his laughter a constant soundtrack. You look like you're exactly where you belong, Arthur said. I feel like it, Mary replied. I used to think that $5 was the end of my story. I thought I was giving up, but I realized now it was a seed. A seed that grew into this, Arthur gestured to the center. You know, the foundation is seeing record donations. People were so moved by the story, the real story of what happened at the terminal. They don't want to just give money anymore. They want to give like you did, with their hearts. They stopped by a fountain. Arthur looked at Mary, his expression turning serious. Mary, I've been thinking a lot about the future, not just the foundation's future, mine. I've spent years alone chasing numbers. You and Leo, you've brought light back into my home. I don't want to go back to the way things were. Mary felt a flutter in her chest. Arthur, you've done so much. I'm not asking for a thank you, Arthur interrupted gently. I'm asking if you'd consider making the penthouse a permanent home, not as a guest, but as my partner. I love you, Mary, and I love that boy as if he were my own. The city hummed around them, the sirens, the shouting, the eternal movement of millions. But in that moment, the world felt very small and very still. Mary looked at the man who had been a stranger on a bench, and then a savior, and now the man she loved. Yes, she whispered, the answer is yes. A year had passed since that fateful night at the Port Authority bus terminal. It was Thanksgiving, and the Sterling Vance household was a whirlwind of activity. The penthouse was filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and sage stuffing. Arthur and Mary had married in a small ceremony over the summer. Leo now called Arthur Dad, a transition that had brought Arthur to tears the first time it happened. But amidst the celebration, Mary felt a pull toward the place where it all began. Arthur, can we do something before dinner? She asked. An hour later, A sleek car pulled up near the 42nd Street entrance of the terminal. Arthur and Mary got out, carrying several large thermal bags. They weren't there for a documentary this time. They were there for a tradition. They walked inside. The terminal was the same grime, the same smell of diesel, the same desperate energy. They found the bench near gate 402. An old man was sitting there, his head down, looking exactly like Arthur had a year ago. Mary walked up to him. She didn't just give him money. She opened a thermal bag and handed him a warm, thick container of turkey, mashed potatoes and gravy. She handed him a pair of high-quality wool socks and a heavy coat. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said softly. The man looked up, stunned. "Thank you, ma'am. God bless you." "He already did," Mary said, glancing back at Arthur. They spent the next 2 hours distributing food and warm clothing to the people huddled in the corners of the terminal. Mary spoke to them, asking their names, hearing their stories. She knew that for many of them being seen was more important than the food. As they were leaving, Mary spotted a young woman standing near the ticket counter. She had a small child with her, a girl of about 4. The woman was counting change, her face a mask of controlled panic. Mary walked over. She didn't say a word about the money. She simply handed the woman a business card for the Bronx Literacy Center. "If you need a job or a place to stay or just someone to help you navigate the system, call this number tomorrow. Ask for Mary. We have a program for mothers." The woman looked at the card, then at Mary. "Why are you helping me?" Mary smiled, a deep, knowing smile. "Because someone once helped me when I had $5 left. I'm just passing back the change." As they walked out into the crisp November air, the city lights seemed to sparkle with a different intensity. The Millionaire CFO and the homeless mom were gone, replaced by 2 people who understood that the true economy of the world wasn't based on gold or stocks, but on the simple, radical act of compassion. The story of Mary and Arthur didn't just stay within the walls of their home or the literacy center. It became a movement. The $5 Initiative was launched, a global charity that encouraged people to give small, direct amounts to individuals in need, coupled with a mentorship system to help them get back on their feet. Years passed. Leo grew into a confident young man, eventually attending NYU to study social work. He never forgot the cold of the terminal, and he spent his weekends volunteering at the center his mother had built. Arthur eventually retired from the corporate world, handing the reins of Sterling and Thorne to a successor who shared his values. He devoted his remaining years to philanthropy, always keeping that framed $5 bill on his desk, no matter where his office moved. On their 10th anniversary, Arthur and Mary sat on the terrace of their home, looking out over the city. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't sat on that bench?" Arthur asked, sipping his tea. "I think about it every day," Mary said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I think about how close I was to giving up. That $5 was the last piece of me I had left. Giving it to you was my way of saying I wouldn't let the world make me cold." "You saved me, Mary," Arthur said. "I was a man who had everything and possessed nothing. You showed me that the only wealth that matters is the wealth you give away." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the Manhattan skyline, the city looked less like a concrete jungle and more like a garden, a place where, if you look closely enough, miracles are growing in the cracks of the sidewalk, fueled by nothing more than a bit of change and a lot of heart. The story of the homeless mom and the millionaire CFO became a modern legend, a reminder to everyone who heard it that no one is ever truly self-made. We are all made by the kindness of strangers, the grace of the universe, and the incredible transformative power of a $5 bill.